Hello. Today's guest was called a bookworm as a kid and never outgrew it. Now she's an internationally acclaimed intuitive teacher, speaker, and an author of over 40 books of her own on energy healing and intuition, including the best-selling classic, The Subtle Body, an encyclopedia of your energetic anatomy, which has won 4 international awards. A hiking fanatic and self-proclaimed stubborn Norwegian, Cyndi Dale has brought clarity, insight, and healing to thousands across the globe. And she joins us today to share the 10 books that did the same for her. Cyndi, welcome.
Hi, Sandie. Thank you for having me here. And what a process. What an internal therapeutic protocol this was. And I began with 30 books and then had to go, why is this important? Why is this one not important? How does this stack up? What does this mean about me in the world? And I really think that was 10 years of psychotherapy, done in many, many hours. I do have to say I spent many hours and it was well worth it too.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about the process, but I think it just takes us back in time. And, like a sense of smell, we remember where we were when we read impactful books. And then, of course, it all comes up, all the memories, what we were doing, what we were thinking at that time, what we learned, etc. So, yes, I'm very grateful to you for taking the time to do it.
Well, it does bring back who we are and who we've been, and maybe ask the question, kind of who do we want to be? Even of anybody perusing these lists and asking themselves the same questions. I really am a bookworm, was a bookworm, and I snuck out of my bedroom many, many, many nights for years in a row with my mother not knowing I was doing that. She had these Reader's Digest condensed books. She had, I think, all of them. We had shelves of them. And I wasn't supposed to be reading them because they're adult content. I mean, there's romance and there's medical mysteries and yet I remember, like you're saying, the smell of the books, that sort of passion for reading yet one more before I fall asleep. And, that little bit of guilt for hiding, kind of what's happening inside as I'm reading, but by and large, that's a lot about life, isn't it? What are we going to grab? What are we going to do with it? It's all the same thing.
So you had a very kind of mature into healing, into reading, because you were reading books that were way beyond, your age group.
I was, and it really also was a path into healing because now I'm an energy healer, because if you can get into the mind of a character and or kind of be part of a plot line. Even now I read every single night, and I choose books. I research a lot of self-help book and science books and spirituality books and medical journals, etc., for my career. But when I'm going to go to bed at night, I want to end up saving the world. So I read a lot of, I guess you would call it male whodunit, action packed, kind of stop torture here or there. And I want to feel like I'm part of that expression that just saved a part of the universe, which I have a hard time thinking I'm doing always on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Nice way to put it. So let's start with your first book, which is a book that you say is the story of an unknown who should not be unknown. And the book is Life and Labours of J.R. Newton, Healer, by Alonzo Newton, published in 1879, and also goes by the alternative title, The Modern Bethesda, The Gift of Healing Restored. Was this one of the early books that you read?
I read this probably about 15 years ago, actually. I downloaded it, the 1890-ish version of this book from the internet, and anybody can do that. I was actually working on my book, The Subtle Body Encyclopedia, connected to a brilliant man who's a friend of yours too, Dr. Stephen Ross, who has a library of every manuscript of any renowned anywhere. And he recommended this book when I was doing my research. And I was why do we not know about Dr. James Newton? Back in the 1800s, mid 1800s onward, he was born with a gift of healing and it came into being. He healed thousands of people. I mean, we're still going to church for Jesus. And there was 33 healings. I'm sure there were more to his credit, but that's what he was accredited with. And this man believed in what he called the magnetic cure, the power of love. He seldom had to spend more than a few minutes with somebody. He knew that God was about love. There's the deceased and angels able to provide healing. And if somebody had the mind to let love in, they could be healed. Thousands of healings. And one of the techniques I use in my business, I call it streams of grace. The science word is I use scalar waves, but whatever, is because of this book. I thought, wow, somebody in Wales saw this line of white. Why aren't we all just using this, letting it do the job for us? So as a healer, I get to just be open and let the love do the work. It's not me. I'm just an accompaniment. I'm not even, kind of in the orchestra. I'm not even conducting the orchestra. I'm hearing and seeing the orchestra. So I think everybody needs to understand this. He's a visionary medium. He was brilliant just to know what's possible for ourselves.
Isn't it silly that just because we can't see it, we don't believe it?
It is because we can't see, we don't believe it. And 99.999% of reality is what we call subtle. When I was being trained as a healer, we called it psychic. It's the same thing. Or now we call it quantum energy or quanta subatomic wave particles. Think about how much we don't see. Our mind, our eyes only visualize something like 0.00032% of the wavelength of electromagnetic radiation or light. It's what we're made of is what we can't see. So as soon as we start understanding that and realizing we're already directing the unseen, it's through our subconscious. We may not know how we're directing it or how others are directing it at us. Sometimes we feel that or become aware of it. What is unseen is what is. And James Newton, to me, is that master, of the unseen. And he reveals an ability to trust. He just trusted. He trusted it would be the way it was supposed to be, which is C.S. Lewis's definition of a miracle, the appearance of what's supposed to be here. And especially these days, there's so many challenges on this planet. There always have been, but the internet allows us to be very aware of them too. I mean, just to believe in something greater and go for it, I think is what we're all called to do right now too.
Are you familiar with Joseph Selby?
I am. Yes.
He wrote the book, The Physics of Miraculous Healing. It's about time that people understood this is real, and love is the highest frequency that there is. And we all know that everything is frequency. So, if you can put yourself in that place of love, you can hit it.
It is. It's all frequency. And we can alter our frequency. We can decide different frequencies to take in. And there's a lot of fascinating research on the universe that it is a huge quantum sea foam that stores data, known and unknown to us, of course, most is unknown, in geometric forms, not just typical geometry, all kinds of stuff. And it is a divine intelligence. And I think its core is love. And it loves us, it supports us. And I hate this stuff about learning our lessons, but it is what it is, right? This is a school for soul, and we can see what's happening, and we can at any point just stop, surrender, and open to being even more self-loving. And then maybe our situations change at some level too.
So book number 2 is Voices of Our Ancestors by Durrani Uahu. I hope I got that right.
I hope it is right too. That's how I say it.
27. And you said you gulped every word in this book.
Well, I've seen chakras both with my eyes and auric fields and everything. And and internally since I was a little kid. Of course, I didn't know what they were. I'm white, wonder-bred, Lutheran, Norwegian. They weren't apparently in the Bible. I think they're in the Bible, but whatever. And her book sets up this tapestry about energy and spirituality. It's the blend of both. She is in her particular sect of the Cherokee or Salagagi tribe. She is the medicine woman, and her book presents basically their belief system, how they came from the stars, how there's still elders guiding them, how there's chakras, and what their beliefs are. And so she's the current carrier, of this wisdom. And her message is the same as I have found in almost every chakra or energetic study. I have a 1,000-page book. It's very large, and it's a great doorstop, if nothing else. But the last half of the book feature chakra systems and energetic modalities from around the world. But I think hers speaks to what I discovered putting all those together, which is that everybody's unified and we're here to take care of the earth. And in turn, the earth will take care of us. And we're to live in compassion. That's enlightenment, is living in compassion. And when I first read her book, it's so earmarked now. I put in paper clips, I underline. I never want to lose my original hard copy of a book because I go through it over and over. Mm-hmm. And her wisdom and it's her tapestry, the illustration, to me, it renders, who we are, how we got here, and what we're to do and what we're to be about. So it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. She actually personally contributed to that encyclopedia, helping to design the chakra system that ended up there. And like any system, it changes a little bit with every depiction of it. But it speaks to our connections and how we're to keep them because of our heart, too.
Book number 3, Skis Against the Atom, the exciting first-hand account of heroism and daring sabotage during the Nazi occupation of Norway by Knut
Hauklid.
1953.
So I'm bragging on this book. I'm bragging on him because my grandmother, Marie Prestong and Norstog, this was her cousin during the occupation of Norway by the Nazis. But if you know anything about Norwegians, and I know quite a bit because I'm all Norwegian, they will look at your face and never argue and go right behind your back and do exactly what's the right thing to do, unless they do the wrong thing. But often they do the right thing. So he was a relative who spent 2 years in the infantry, basically, the Telemark Infantry Regiment, mainly on skis, blowing up heavy water factories and systems and structures so the Norwegians couldn't make the bomb. And this is the kind of courage that I think we're called for at least once in every lifetime. I think we're each tapped to stand up and make a difference. Certainly today, I've sort of joined the activism in my own way, of standing up against what I believe is sort of some fascism that's occurring in America and is happening in many, many countries, even more violently around the world. But I have my own way of being very Norwegian about this and getting in messages and speaking. But I think some of it is because I knew about him when I was growing up. When years ago I visited the Oslo Resistance Museum, it's very poorly done. There's newspaper articles that are yellowing. The lighting is bad. There isn't much to it. And yet I cried because it put my issues in perspective. And it really riled up in me the respect for anybody who does what's absolutely necessary to stand up for what's right. I mean, a lot of times we do know the difference between right and wrong. I know, Sandie, in everyday life, we're often making decisions between worse and worser, right? But sometimes the lines are clear. And his tale speaks to that type of clarity. I think he very much enjoyed the fame that followed. That's my gut sense. There was a movie about him and he was honored. I think he was given an American citizenship. And most of us don't get fame for what we do, right? So we just have to live with that sense of ennoblement and hope, that what's good keeps going as well. But it's an adventure. It's like a Hardy Boys adventure, on skis.
And those kinds of books, which were the only kinds of books when I was a child, and the comics that we used to have, everyone was a hero. They always did the right thing. And kids don't have that today.
They don't. They have shooter up games. They don't have that. My dad traveled a lot and he would bring books back from every trip. And he brought one time the book, Little Women Who Became Great, and another time the book, Little Men Who Became Great. And I was like, where am I going to be great? How am I going to be like Isadora Duncan or Madame Curie or, Jenner who invented this, or Pasteur, or, we even look at the myths. And, Hercules, he screwed up, but he eventually did the right thing. So did Odysseus. We don't have a lot of heroes right now.
We need to bring the heroes back. Real heroes.
I have a good friend and she has been posting on her YouTube for quite some time. She's, in her 60s, very wise, really fascinating personality. She was cracking up because the recordings that have taken off are about how to do your makeup when you're a middle-aged woman. I'm like, how to do your makeup? I'm sorry. You put on your mascara and your lipstick and you're done. It's all ages that we really fall into the superficial, not the heart, not the purpose, not the cause, not the courage.
And yet when we hear these stories of, great courage, people just warm to them. Let's start a mission. Let's bring back the heroes.
Yes, let's not get them erased. Here in America, Arlington Cemetery and the Pentagon have been erasing our heroes. If they're women, if they're Black, if they're Native American, if they're Hispanic, and I'm just roused to protest, as almost everybody are, because of course, the first thing you do is erase history, and you erase the special parts of history, if you want to dumb people down. So we have to remember our own heroism too. I think that's also in here. When we stood up for somebody and nobody really noticed, but we did it anyway. I think that self acknowledgement can also be a path to doing, what needs to be done right now.
Yeah. Why would we not want to inspire the next generation?
Absolutely.
Why would we not? So book number 4 is The Snow Goose by Paul Gallico, published in 1941. And this too is available free on the internet. So at the end, we'll give you a link where you can go and find these.
All these old books are free. Yeah. So Paul Gallico was most well known when I was growing up for the Poseidon Adventure, which is this boat that turns upside down and somebody tries to get up to the top of it and, et cetera. But before all that, I read this book when I was a child, and very small. It is set in World War II, and it's about a man named Philip, who is a hunchback. That's the word that was used. I don't know the modern word, for that condition. A loner, lives in a lighthouse, an artist, and this girl comes to him, this very shy little girl, Fritha, with a wounded snow goose. And they nurse it back to health. She disappears. The snow goose returns at the same time every year, and so does she. And he is then called during the Battle of Dunkirk to get his little sailboat, and the snow goose accompanies him. I feel like crying, to rescue soldiers in the water. He doesn't return. The snow goose comes back to say goodbye to Fritha. And it's the story of soul, how we can move beyond our own loneliness, what society does, which is to discriminate, And to me, when I read this book, which I have many times as a child, I was like, I hope I'm able to recognize in people who they really are and not be scared to care about people just because they're different. That's what it did to me. And, uh, it's a beautiful message across time for all time. It made me feel guilty too when I first read it, maybe 4th or 5th grade, because in maybe 3rd grade, I was part of this group of girls. I was a reject. I was not popular. I had a Southern accent in the Midwest. I was not cool. I had strange clothes. My mother would make some of them out of draperies. I was just so not okay. So it felt sort of good at one level to join these girls in mocking another little girl named Lisa, who was Prussian. And afterwards, I felt so guilty. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I had the heart for that. And I think this book later helped me see it's not acceptable. It is not acceptable, Cyndi. So there's a conscience in us all. And I think it calls for us to have that awakened too.
Absolutely. So book number 5 is Healing and Christianity by Morton T. Kelsey, published in 1973.
So I think he's passed, an Episcopalian priest. And I grew up very Christian. I worked toward a master's in divinity. I always ask questions you're not supposed to ask, like, why are there 2 creation stories and one of the gods is plural? And why are there no real women? And how come the name for the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament is actually female, but we say he? And, what is all this about? His rendering is brilliant. He took actually a healing / shamanic perspective, as well as a Jungian perspective, and ended up depicting Jesus as a shaman. And of course, then Elijah is a shaman, and Elisha is a shaman, and all these, beings in there are shamans. And, so it's a worldwide phenomenon that we've disappeared greatly in the West, where being a priest, and I mean that with priestess as well, and a healer were one and the same, when spirit and science, where the medical and the knowledge of something greater were indivisible. And that's really what he analyzed. He did look at how Christianity came into being and the writers and this and that. And for me, especially in America, with this rise in white nationalist Christianity, Christian supremacy is what I call it. They don't know the roots. They do not know the data. They have no idea what is really about, and how many Old Testament healers were using divination, were going through their own lessons to not be jerks, frankly, and kind of what the real message is, and what it meant when Jesus spoke in Aramaic, and how there's so much distortion. So to me, his book awakened me. And at the time when I read it, I was in the seminary, and I was also doing ayahuasca ceremonies, partaking of them in Peru. The same ceremony that we did several times in the seminary was the very same ceremonies we were going through ritualistically in the jungle. And I'm like, can we not see we're all the same? That we're all just open to whatever it is we want to call spirit? I don't care the name. I don't care if people believe in anything. I think what matters is that love believes in us. And then we can hold ourselves accountable to that if we could grow as well as love would seek us to grow. So it's a very intelligent book.
Yeah. The same things.
We do.
I've often said, if you could get every person in the United Nations to sit there and swap photographs of their children and grandchildren, we would understand how similar we all are.
And it's about those children. I have a grandbaby, which you and I have visited about. She's 8.5 months. I spent my weekend with her. And you look at that joy and innocence and development. And why would we have war? Why would we tell a little girl like that who's, Japanese, Norwegian, a little bit of Jewish, German, that there's something wrong with any part of her bloodline, or there's anything less than goodness, that she gets to learn about herself? Why would we give any kind of message that this is better than that? Why would we do that?
We have to be damaged ourselves, don't we?
We are, and I'm damaged. I mean, I grew up in the typical, very, very alcoholic family with lots of abuse, some physical, some sexual. It's ancestral. It goes all the way back, crazy making stuff. I was just very fortunate to enter therapy when I was about 20, and it didn't cure me. It didn't make me all of a sudden not OCD or not have this issue or that issue, or, look, it just made me look at myself and make different decisions. Do I really want to be a yeller? Do I want to be irresponsible when it comes to money? Do I want to do this or that? Do I want to drink or not, which I don't? So we all are going to have these suitcases full of mismatched clothing that we keep wearing, and maybe want to throw away the suitcases, keep a few of the items, and create brand new too.
Yeah. Book number 6, The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, published in 1991. This gets mentioned again and again in people's top 10 lists.
Of course it does. I still look at this book. I've earmarked it. I quote studies out of it, even if they came, from decades ago, because he put it together. Here's the universe. Here's why psychic phenomenon exists. Here's why there's lucid dreams. Here's how healing miracles occur. This is what near-death experiences are about. And here's quantum physics and how it interconnects it. And I did have to choose, and I went back and forth between this book and Vibrational Medicine by Dr. Richard Gerber, which is the best energy medicine book ever written, by far above any of mine and anybody else's, and it always will be. So I do have to partner those together, because Dr. Richard Gerber went into the anatomy and into magnetics and electricity, and Michael Talbot gave the context. They both did the same thing, but just in different languaging. So I think it needs to be honored over and over. I don't really know if I need to know much more than what's in those two books, to be honest. Yeah. Vibrational Medicine and Holographic. I can update my research. It's already in those books.
Yeah. Vibrational Medicine was a game changer for me. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
God knows, back in the 80s, 90s or something. Yeah.
Awesome. Still should be read by anybody for any reason. How we work, what it's about. It's all in there.
Book number 7. Now, here's a long title for you. Biologically Closed Electric Circuits, Clinical, Experimental, and Theoretic Evidence for an Additional Circulatory Circuit by Dr. Bjorn E.W. Nordenstrom. And I cannot find when this was published. So, circuits.
Right. He lived, he was on the Nobel Peace Prize Committee. He's a radiologist, and he didn't die all that long ago. So I don't even know when the book was published. I have a copy of it. I haven't opened it because it cost me $800, and that was years ago. And I have it bound up. I live in fear that my children will get it right when I die and just toss it, because it's like, this is important. But I have read the book, and then a boyfriend stole it, like the first version that I had. Not a good relationship is somebody stealing that book. So here's why it's so important. There have been many authors that have shown and proven the biology of life is electrical. It's electrical magnetic. And then, of course, we have sound. But he went a step further. He was healing people of cancer and eye diseases because he figured out how injury occurs and how it travels through the body and how to rebalance the electrical magnetic circuits so that we can heal. It's very simple. And in his studies, he showed how any injury enters the connective tissue. And we're like, and then it travels through the meridian. So now we know there's energy systems and there's real. They're not lymph tissue. They're exactly where the meridians are. They go into the cardiovascular system, then into the central nervous system. Science is completely off when it talks about trauma. It keeps saying that traumatic reactions, first hit the neurological system, but that's not true. That's not what happens. First, it enters the system, the meridians and the structures of the anatomy of subtle body is primary. And then the electrical and the magnetic balances get off and the brain freezes them into place. By rebalancing, he was helping to do healing work. I mean, to me, it's science, and he showed it and it worked, and we've been ignoring it ever since.
Wow. Well, the book is free, so anybody can go and download it. And
they can download it. Yeah. Getting a real copy,
for that.
Hard to do.
Yeah. So book number 8, A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle, published in 1962.
Well, I hope this is on everybody's favorite lists, even if they don't put it on your site. Over and over, I've read this book since 3rd grade. In 6th grade, our teacher read it to us. I was like, oh, this is like magic. It's a story. It's a young adult novel. I think it describes the same thing I've been talking about. How does this world work, and what's the context universally? So the main character is sort of grumpy and challenged, and she's got an odd family, and her father's been captured by evil. And, and so it's how do they rescue him, and how does she work through some of, her inner issues. So, the story itself is enticing. It takes us off world. We meet characters who are stars, who are just like the angels, but it basically talks about no matter how flawed we are, we all have access to the ultimate power, which is the power of love, to make the right decisions and to do the right thing. I think it also describes his planet, because when she and her team go off world and they look at Earth, there's shadows. We're a shadowed planet. Our hearts are shadowed, but every time we choose light, every time we do something that increases good, even if just for a moment, the shadow clears and there's a little bit more hope for us all. And told in story form, I don't think I could ever write, and I'm working on fiction, but I don't think I could ever write a book equivalent to that one. I don't think I ever could come up with something that is that precisely real and clear.
It's interesting how some books like this, they go right through, all the way through, and people don't know why they're responding to a book like that, but they become classics. And I think it's because they have truth in them.
Truth.
We all recognize.
Yep. Susan Cooper's has a young adult series set in Wales. The Dark is Rising. It's the same young adult. I think we aim at speaking to that group. There's so many of these priceless books aimed at that, age level, maybe because they're still open to them. But I think as adults, we need to be reading them.
Yes. Book number 9, another interesting one, never come up before. Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes, published in 1966. Actually,
well, it's a very depressing book.
It was published in earlier than that, 1959.
Yes. First it was a short story. Then it was turned into a novel. And there's been at least one movie, if not more. So this is one of the books I read in an abridged version first when I was a small child. And I was like dismayed. I was shocked. I was hurt, not hurt like personally, but hurt in my heart for what we humans are like, for our potential and the pain that we give together, to each other, and literally do get together and pass on. So it features a man, Charlie, who is not smart. And because there was an experiment done on a mouse called Algernon, who was not smart and became smart, they now do the same experimentation, a surgical experimentation on Charlie, and it becomes brilliant. And Algernon eventually dies. He goes downhill first and becomes a typical mouse. And Charlie then knows he's going to regress. And in the end, he doesn't really realize that he's going to be dying, because he's back into, his less intelligent state. And he's happy as he was before, even though he was being bullied. So he loses his intellect, but in some ways he regains his joy. And I think it's a statement about a question mark about who do we value? How do we value them? Words have been added now, neurodivergent and, kind of specialness and sensitivity. And there's all these kind of new words. We question the value of somebody with Alzheimer's, or dementia, and, et cetera. The values of somebody with Down syndrome. And, I can't make those decisions for other people, but this book raises those questions about who or what is valuable and why. But it made me at a very early age, again, confront attitudes that I was raised with, even though my parents were pretty interesting, about being at least more inclusive than other parents. I remember one time I was probably 4.5. We lived in Huntsville, Alabama. My dad worked for NASA. I remember this vividly. My dad's boss came to dinner and he started cutting down Jewish people. Well, my uncle's Jewish. I thought I was Jewish. All right. And my mother got up from the table, got the pickles. I'm like, why is she getting pickles? Put them on the table. They were kosher pickles, kosher dills, right? Which I didn't know what the word meant then. She goes, we run a kosher household. And he was so flabbergasted that it took me a few years to really figure out what she had said. But I remember being like, this is really important. You have to remember this, Cyndi. Later, she explained to me what kosher was. And it was like my Uncle Mike and the Holocaust. So by a very early age, I had knowledge. And I thought, wow, look at this. So she brought my attitude to an expanded level at a relatively early age. And I think this book kind of stretched those boundaries again.
Book number 10. This is a consistent favourite. And as we said about A Wrinkle in Time, they're parables, There's something that Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach, published in 1970. I mean, everybody loves this book.
I want the kids to read it. I need to give it to both my sons, who are now men. Right?
Yeah.
So many of us of a certain age are going to know about this book, where Jonathan is a seagull who wants more. He wants to fly faster. He wants to reach higher. He wants to be more than about mediocrity and survival and what all the other seagulls are doing. Like, can't you just care about the fish and how many, fish you're eating? So he basically becomes an outcast. And I think many of us, if we've at all expanded our consciousness and burst out even a little bit of the borders we were born in, have felt both inspired and we have hurt feelings. We think of ourselves as outcasts at some level, but he went beyond the limits. And he eventually learns that there's other beings who also did this. It's just like now, every so often, Sandie, and I'm sure we've all had this experience once in a while, I'm aware of more. Like, I like to teach that there's two basic universes. I use words that are in science, but I won't go into it. There's an absolute universe made out of a true type of light that casts no darkness. And then there's our polarity universe. That's the everyday, that's dualistic. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's our growth medium. But every so often, I know I'm connected to what's more absolute. I feel it. I see it. It's like right there. And they're so busy. They're like his advanced seagull friends, right? They're doing things I can only dream of. And I know they're dreaming of those things for me and with me too. So there's so much more than we can do or see. So I'm just like everybody. I get caught up in my lists. I love lists. I love checking lists off. I just love lists, and they're fine. But they only take you so far because I forget to put on the list, expand, or be aware of your helpers, or fly a little more, or see a little bit more light today. So maybe someday I'll invent like a real list. Wouldn't that be cool? Like note paper that has those kind of things on the list too. That's actually a really good idea. I might invent that. Never thought of it, but it's a very good idea. If only I buy it.
You'll write it for yourself and then you'll buy it.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, considering that you've published 40 books,
yeah,
I think there may be a market for you.
Like a better type of list. And you can still put on there, take a shower, which you're going to do, but it feels so good to cross it off.
Yeah. So, 40 books. I mean, that is such a huge feat. I mean, books are my work and my life, and I know what goes into them. I don't know how you've managed to do that and everything else you've done, because, I mean, you literally have crisscrossed the world, and your trainings and your studies, Peruvian shamanism, you've been in Belize, you've been in Hawaii, Costa Rica, Morocco, Iceland, Venezuela. Why did you go to so many places? You must have encountered lots of, nuances on the different approaches.
In third grade, I had a Jesus picture, the Jesus picture that looks like a white man, right? And I was already sort of stuck and bored at the same time. I wrote a list of all these things I wanted to do, and I stuck them in the Jesus picture. The writing wasn't very clear, but later in college, I remembered that list. I looked at it again. And even by college, I was on my own. I was independent since about 19 or 20. And I loved travel. I always wanted to travel. I'd already traveled, just moved somewhere before I could go back to college after my parents divorced. And, I had no money. But I still moved. And I thought, what am I doing about this list? I need to do this list. And it didn't per se say go study healing, but it said travel, go here, go there, learn this, learn that. And so it reminded me of what had been in my soul when I was just a little kid. And so I was very fortunate that you look back and you go, well, that wasn't a mistake. It was great that I was independent from the time I was young, because you don't have anything to lose. There's nobody to please because you're already, the family's already unhappy with you. So it's sort of like, well, I might as well go here, and I might as well do this, and I might as well go off track, and I might as well do this. I didn't finish my college degree till my early 30s, to be honest. But I had internships in corporate and taught ethics, but the goal was always something different and deeper. And that propelled me. I was somehow able to hold on to, there's more, and I want to understand it. I want to understand it spiritually, and I want to understand it scientifically. So I just was able to do that. My first husband was a veterinarian, a PhD veterinarian, and he traveled. So I could start traveling with him in my 20s. Venezuela, and, other places. And then I just kept going because I was drawn to learn. I was drawn to what is healing? What is the world? What's in the world? And somehow I managed to be able to stay in touch with my intuition. One time I was in Costa Rica with friends, and I'm looking at this map. in the Gold Museum in San Jose. And I'd gone, just to experience Costa Rica. And then this voice came in and showed me the southern part of Costa Rica, kind of near Panama, and said, go there. There's a shaman you need to meet. So my next trip I did, brought a couple friends. We went down there and we met a shaman who taught me. I thought I was going to learn this rigorous set of healing. That's not what happened. We hiked in. Well, we took this bus that had basically no floor, hiked to the shaman's place. He wasn't even there. I'm with my friend Dave, who's dressed in army fatigues, which is really stupid, and another friend of ours. We put our tent up because we're told the shaman will be the next morning. And it's like, Cyndi has to learn something from him, so we're going to be here. There was somebody else there. He had a crack addiction. And he was really the person I was supposed to meet, because in the morning when we were waiting for the shaman to do healing work on us, and I'm going to learn more about healing, I found out that he charged the crack addict $1,000 for a session and me like $1. And I asked him, why did you just do that? He goes, now he has no money to be a crack addict. So he's healed. So we're all curious, aren't we? I've just been able to indulge my curiosity. And frankly, once you've written a couple books, there's sort of a system. So I follow the system, and I'm bored with myself. So I truly am, seeking now to go off road and learn how to write fiction too.
Yes. You call yourself, you're almost doubtful that you have that ability. Why would you doubt it?
Because it hasn't been, because I hired 2 coaches to begin with for my very first novel, a young adult fantasy series, crossover romancy. Now I know the language, and I knew the plot line, and I knew the characters. I hired 2 coaches to help me. I've kept the one who's the tough one. She edits every word 7 times. So I deliberately chose to work with a teacher who could get me good. But the first 7 chapters, now I'm well into the book, have probably each been edited 20 times. And there's probably another 20 times to go. So I don't think I'm good yet. Until it passes her inspection with minimal edits, I feel like then I'm going to call myself good.
Okay. I can understand that. And I would also add one little thought to that, and that is we all have our own idea of perfection.
Yes, we do, don't we? Yes. Absolutely. We do. And I actually have learned by writing nonfiction books that I love that my editors are more perfectionistic than me. So they can move a book from, good to maybe even great. So it's okay to have help. I've also learned that along the way.
I'll be very interested to see it when it's finished.
It will be great when it's finished. This part's a trilogy. I've got that 8-part series already mapped out and started. I have female messiahs in the first 3 books. So they're awesome characters. They're awesome first characters, and a wonderful amount of romance, because in young adult you have to have romance. In life you have to have a little romance too.
And are you putting in there all of the insights and the tools and the teachings?
I am.
Sliding them in.
All the healing, a little bit of science, a lot of science, that I've acquired along the way. It's all kind of sliding in. And I love writing for the young adult novel. It's sort of like how many of the books I like are young adult, because there's an understanding there and an open mind to, this is what the world's really about. This is why I feel like this. So it speaks to our true nature. And I want them to be made into movies. I have to get going, but I want them to be made into movies, because you put something on the screen and there's a new life to it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about, there are many, 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 and thank goodness there are, energy healers and energy healing teachers on the planet. And your teachings, your offerings seem to be a little bit different. You have apprenticeships for people. You do it through the Normandale College in Minneapolis, and you have a 7-class certificate program. Tell me, why have you constructed, what has been your inspiration in the way that you've constructed your teaching?
I do like my longer programs. I have like a 1.5 year one with Shift and a 9 month with myself. I do a lot of shorter ones where the shorter ones I like to put my recent research in, what I find is working. Like I have a 7 week that's on quantum patterns, which science is just starting to tap into for doing healing work actually in the physical biological body. And I'm like, why are we going to wait until I write a book about this, or until 40 years from now? This is the way to do real healing work. So a lot of times I do my shorter works with the more modern ideas and techniques, and the longer ones because I don't want to leave a legacy about myself. I don't care about that part. My kids are still the most important people in my life, and now my grandbaby, and their partners, they're the real legacy. That's where you work your stuff through. That's where the magic matters. But I want to help awaken other healers to who they are and what they do. So I teach my basic techniques because anybody can do them and anybody can adapt them to whatever their style is. I love merging energy, ancient wisdom, energy ideas, chakras, and science, because I think the brain does best if it knows what's happening, and then it can get out of the way and let things happen. So I do think my approach is different. Some people call me a spiritual scholar. I am an English major with a philosophy minor. I I've done certificates. I think it's a testimony that none of us should be shy about what our basic gifts are and going for it and going through the school of hard knocks, which I certainly have, and rising again. I think there is I love when people get PhDs in what really matters, or doctors. I'm going to go to a medical doctor if I need a prescription medicine. But I also think that the off-road hasn't been valued enough. And that if we come from our natural strengths, I think you can be who you are. It doesn't mean it's easy. It's not like do what you love and the money will follow. Well, it might take 10 years. So I'm very much a realist as well. But I know my path and I understand certain things that other healers don't. Energetic boundaries, psychological boundaries, science boundaries. So I think all I can do is offer what I've learned in a construct so people can adapt it to who they really are. That's really all I'm doing.
Have you noticed, people talk about there's almost like a tsunami of awakening taking place across the planet. Have you noticed more and more people coming to you, in this last few years than previous decades?
Absolutely. Starting with the pandemic, everything doubled or tripled. And all of a sudden people are like, what's going on? How can I impact my own world? What is spirit? What is spirituality? How am I making my decisions? What decisions should I make? It's phenomenal. And in the one book by Susan Cooper, young adult novel, The Dark is Rising, it is said, when the dark rises, the light rises faster and quicker. That's consciousness. I don't think we can separate consciousness from conscientiousness because I can be a consciously bad person and kind of enjoy it sometimes, maybe even two. But I think there's a huge awakening because the system isn't working, right? I have so many clients who they don't even have a diagnostic or they have 10 diagnostics and they're like, nothing's working. That's where we've gotten because it's so complicated. Food isn't healthy. Medicine isn't necessarily medicine anymore. If a prescription medicine works, that's fantastic. Let yourself take it, but they don't tend to work. much of the time. So what are we going to do? We have to go backward in time and take responsibility and learn from the ancients. And we have to go forward in time. Like when sound and light are going to be the ways of doing this, as well as how we approach ourselves, and it's for a long time, we know you become like the people you hang out with. So there's some very simple approaches to health, as well as the more complicated energy medicine ideas. I love in a lot of ways what's happening. I think we're being roused and aroused and asked, to become more aware, to become more conscious. And there's always a balance to that. So sometimes when some people become more conscious, there's going to be others who, for whatever reason, their own psychology, would rather go hide back again in the dark. We can't change everybody and we can't change everything. Just do ourselves.
And we can. I mean, we're all healers. However, that expresses itself. And, even just a kind word is enough.
A kind word is everything. I have a lovely friend who I've known for decades, and he years ago said to me, "You know what the most communicable disease is, Cyndi?" And I go, "I don't know, AIDS." I don't remember what I said. He goes, "Depression." He said, "It's depression. It's what can we do for ourselves? How can we make every interaction just as positive or honest as we're able to do?" I feel so grateful for my life. I don't really have bad days. I have days where I'm more tired because the dogs are up. I have 3 animals, you know what I mean? Pooping all night, or, or I was traveling and I'm jet lagged, or, I actually do make all my deadlines. But I worry about them too much sometimes. So I have days that have their fluidity up and down, but I don't think I have bad days because I feel so grateful to be alive. I mean, you must feel that, Sandie.
Yeah.
Just to be here. It's such an honor that we're all here.
My big thing is know yourself. If you know yourself, if you know who you truly are and what you've got access to, depression, everything else falls away. It does.
Amen. I think that's the real true message. And you put it in, kind of, one sentence for all of us. Thank you.
So, Cyndi, apart from the novel, are you writing any more nonfiction books at the moment?
I'm finishing up a series of 8 books that are each about chakras. And the last book, which I'm finally polishing, is the top 5 chakras that I work with. And then I'm gonna take a break, I think, from nonfiction for a while. I think I have one more big project in me. I'd like to do a book about enlightenment, a big book about the energy, the history, the spirituality, and the science of it. That would be the last big project. And I don't have the energy for it right now because I'm editing fiction often. So we'll see. You never know, because I can say something today and it changes tomorrow. But that's sort of where I'm at right now.
Right. Okay, final question for you. Steve Jobs famously gave every attendee at his memorial a copy of Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi. What book would you give to the people who attend your memorial service?
I would give them The Snow Goose. And you know what? I've given that book to so many people, family members, etc. I don't think one of them has ever read it, but I would give it anyway.
Good choice. Good choice. Yeah, it's very telling, very interesting asking people that question.
It is. What book would you give? Have you ever answered that? I bet you have.
Nobody's asked me, but
I want to know.
My favourite book that I'm talking about right now is the book that I would have loved to have had, 20, 30 years ago, when all of my family and friends were saying, "You're crazy for believing all that woo-woo stuff." It's a book called Extraordinary Knowing, and it is by a lady who passed very early, called Elizabeth Meyer. who was straight as a die, clinical psychologist, psychotherapist, psychiatrist, I'm not sure, but had no time for anything woo-woo until something happened that just, she could not, she just couldn't get this right in her head. And it was a woo-woo incident. And then she decided that when she talked to colleagues about it, they started telling her about their anomalous experiences. And she began to think, why has nobody done the research? So she undertook from the 80s onwards, and she was part of the original CIA team that did all the remote viewing. She's been part of so many studies throughout our history. She was very well known and loved by IONS. And this book to me is it's very enjoyable, answers so many questions, but this is the book that you give to people who say, I don't believe that. Read this. And then tell me that your mind hasn't opened. Love the book. Yeah, love it.
Excellent.
And she's also, for me, she's also the interview that got away, the one that I didn't get to do. I would have loved to have had a conversation with her.
Maybe on the other side, or maybe she shows up in some of your conversations and you just don't know.
I hope so. I haven't yet seen anybody recommend her book, so I'm saying it. I'll recommend it.
I would clip that and put it on YouTube. Very important.
Yeah, good idea. Cyndi, thank you. It has been such fun and so enlightening. And we're really grateful to you for adding your 10 best, your personal 10 best list of books to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. This show is also available as a free downloadable podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the major podcast platforms, also as a video on YouTube. Now, if you want to know more about Cyndi Dale's books, classes, and upcoming events, visit cindydale.com. And if you're interested in downloading those PDFs Cyndi mentioned, you'll find a link below in the description on YouTube and hopefully on Spotify too, that will take you to Cyndi's dedicated page on the No BS Spiritual Book Club, where she shares what she shared today and gives more information. And that page will take you to the websites you need to download those books. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and you can listen to or watch another 10 Best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you again, Cyndi Dale.